the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
What's up?
If you've got a tip you'd like Melissa to talk about, an unsolved murder in your town, a true crime story you find fascinating, a polite way to tell your neighbor you really don't want to join her monthly scrapbooking club, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. If she had Paul Hull's cell phone number, she'd be in jail right now, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Oh, my beloved producer Mark, how well you know me. It is a very good thing that I do not have Detective Paul Hull's cell phone number, because you would be having to scrape up bail money.
Yeah, I would. I've been hearing his name a lot lately as I've been falling to sleep and you've been looking at your iPad.
Yes, and I know you don't have time. You're a busy man, but if you did, or any of the tipsters needed something to do, just look around, hashtag hot for holes.
I actually looked that up.
How'd that go?
It's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it's kind of disturbing. It's a lot of cut and paste pictures of the handsome Paul Hull, who is going to be a rock star. He's retired, a few weeks before they actually arrested the Golden State Killer, but he put in 22 long, hard years. That's what she said about trying to find.
You did not just do that.
I'm sorry. I can't help you. No, I can't.
Okay.
He's very far away. He's married. He has kids. And besides, I love you.
Okay, I know. I love you too.
He's the cutest thing in the whole wide world.
And I think you're right, though. I think he's going to end up being a consultant on 48 Hours or Dateline NBC or something.
They're just going to have a total like Paul Hull's channel.
Yeah.
Hull's TV.
Yeah. I don't know how that sounds, but I'm...
Oh, it does sound like an adult channel, doesn't it? Yeah,
sorta.
No. He is a rock star. So I had not tackled this case because it is so voluminous and so overwhelming, and I feel like other outlets have handled it beautifully, and who needs to hear this dog and pony show about this case. But, it is one that has obsessed me for quite a few years, as producer Mark can attest. It's fascinating and creepy and awful and weird. And I do remember 10 or 12 years ago us catching an episode of, I think it was called Cold Case Files, and they profiled the Golden State Killer.
With Bill Curtis, yes, I do remember.
With a K. I don't know. I think it's with a K.
It is.
I love Bill Curtis. It's probably 3 L's and a K. Because he's very unique.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating at the time because it was such a long ago case and had come to no conclusion and was still considered open. And because of the demeanor and behavior of the offender, it was thought he could still be alive. I actually thought he was alive, but I never thought he would be caught, quite frankly. But I thought he was substantially younger than he turned it out to be. Turned English major. Instead of 72, I thought he was probably early to mid-60s. But that's because he presented as a child, and I think he probably still is. I think he's got a horrible arrested development. So before I get into the recent arrest of the Golden State Killer, when you don't know exactly how to begin something so big and so important, you have to leave it to the masters. So Buddha said it best: 3 things that can't be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And Joseph James DeAngelo, your truth has come out and you have been shoved into the light, and you don't have a choice. All your secrets are going to come to light, and the monster that everyone said you were for the last 42 years is going to be proven every which way from Sunday. So this case, fascinating as it is, is unknown to a lot of people, and I'm shocked at that. Even as a youngster in northern Kentucky, I knew who Charles Manson was, and he was in California, and I was 12, and found my way to a paperback copy of Helter Skelter.
You were 12.
When I was 12.
And your mother knew about this?
No, I don't believe so. My mother tried to ply me with hard cover versions of John Dean's Blind Ambition. I think she probably wanted me to go on to be a senator or something. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm going to go get some really shitty joke books and a really great book on serial killer. Actually, Charles Manson didn't kill anyone, but he talked a lot of people into killing other people. And it was so fascinating because it was so weird and strange and nothing like I'd ever seen. So the Golden State Killer at the time was called the East Area Rapist. And then it felt odd when they kept referring to him as that. And then they changed the name, added on original Night Stalker after Richard Ramirez was given that name in 1984. He had a very short reign of terror from 84 to 85. And they went backwards and said, oh, okay, so it's East Area Rapist, EAR, / original Night Stalker, ONS. So it's Eron's. So just a few of the names that he has been given over the years: the East Area Rapist, the East Side Rapist, the original Night Stalker, the Diamond Knot Killer, and the Visalia Ransacker, which sounds like a little kid who's like knocks over your garbage cans. And in a sense he was, except he was intent on providing much more terror. He was literally a homegrown terrorist. His goal was to terrorize people, and he did. And in the worst and yet most childlike way of making crank calls. I'm surprised he didn't gather dog shit and set it on fire and put it on people's front porches. I mean, there has to be some sort of arrested development. So going backward a little bit, in 2013, February of 2013, Michelle McNamara wrote a fantastic feature for Los Angeles Magazine, and I scooped that up like it was Diet Mountain Dew. It was just incredibly well written, and it got her book deal for her book that was published in February of this year, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. And it's a fantastic book, and I weep for all of us. I weep for the literate world because we lost a real gem. She was magnificent in the way that she could make something so awful almost poetic. She was able to put forth extremely dry details, statistics, etc., on a case that was awful, and yet just when you thought you couldn't see one more detail, she would swoop around and make it personal. And then you would be like, oh, I get it now, I understand. She was really masterful, and she did a fantastic job. It's beautiful and heartbreaking that she passed away 2 years ago, actually in April 2016, and her book came out in February of 2018 with the help of some contributors. She was most of the way done. She had done years of research and being obsessed, and that was another one of the things I adored about her. So Billy Jensen, who is a true crime writer and a producer writer on True Crime Daily and some other shows, and Paul Haynes, who was her researcher. They got together and helped finish the book from Michelle's notes, voluminous amounts of notes and files, and it was seamless. You don't really notice that it's not her writing unless they make you aware. Editor's note: this section was combined with Michelle's notes and contributions from Billy Jensen and Paul Haynes. So it's a beautiful book. I don't work for the publisher. I don't know who published it, but if you have a chance to read it, it's a fantastic book on its own, and the subject matter is really fascinating. And so tipsters from across the country, across the world, who don't give a shit about this case, I urge you to consider giving a shit, because this is a man who hid in plain sight for 42 years. He was your neighbor, my neighbor. He could have easily been from Wisconsin, and he was a monster. And he pulled it off, but not forever. Not forever, Joseph James DeAngelo. So we'll start at the beginning. November 8th, 1945, Joseph James DeAngelo is born in Bath, New York, and he's the middle child of Kathleen and Joseph DeAngelo Sr. When he's under 10, his parents get divorced, and his mother remarries Jack Bosenko, and Jack and Kathleen move the family to Auburn, California in 1960. So he finishes out his school at Folsom High School, and he graduated, which I guess they let him go through the ceremony, but he received a GED the following year. So after he gets his GED, he joins the Navy. So he serves for 22 months in Vietnam, apparently off island and on a boat, and, situations back and forth where people say he saw no action, he saw some action. I don't care. He didn't come home wearing a necklace made out of Vietnamese children's ears. So I don't think he got it. I don't think he had it real hard there. So he docks back in San Diego and comes back to Northern California after 22 months. And apparently the diamond knots that were tied around some of the victims were perfected during his time in the Navy. There were many jobs that investigators, profilers have thought that he's had over the years, and ironically, I'm pretty sure he had all of them. Military, law enforcement, real estate. He could, later on when he blended into the world, work at a grocery store. What? Yeah. It ends up working for a Save Mart for the last 27 years of his work life, repairing trucks. So
it really seems like he could slip into anything.
You're right. I think he's much more of a chameleon, and that you're making a very good point. I like to pride myself on being what I would call a really good witness. So, like, if someone stole a newspaper off someone's porch, I'd be like, that kid had on a striped Old Navy shirt and a pair of Levi's and a pair of Converse, and he had almond-shaped blue eyes. And I'm a detail freak and a half. And what's so amazing, if you do any research or have seen any news stories about this story, there are so many different witness descriptions of the East Area Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker. It's and I get it. We're talking over a long period of time, even though his reign of terror was physically only 10 years, and he extended it with, phone calls and bizarre actions. Over 10 years, someone changes somewhat, but typically not that much. But the first picture of him when he was hired for a police force, his first job as a police officer, he's kind of pudgy and baby-faced. And 3 years later, moves on to his next assignment as a police officer in a different city, in a different jurisdiction. He's a lean, mean fighting machine. And he's got a mustache like a 1970s porn star. And it's like, that's the same guy. And he's described by witnesses as dark blonde hair, as dark hair, as blue eyes, as typically the height is almost always the same, between 5'8" and 5'10", and or between 5'9" and 5'11", and he was 5'10", 160 to 180. It's really amazing that the body type was pretty on the mark, but boy, what a list of descriptions. So he returns from the Navy with his diamond knot tying skills, and he enrolls in 1968 at Sierra College, and he meets Bonnie, and that name is going to be important later. And he and Bonnie are engaged in 1970, and their announcement is printed in the Auburn Journal. And he receives an associate degree in political science from Sierra College, and he receives honors. Now, not long after the engagement, he and Bonnie break up. And he enrolls in Cal State Sacramento in 1971, and he receives a BA in criminal justice. Irony. In 1970,
Or incredibly convenient.
maybe he was studying on how to. I don't even want to go. I can't think that far. It just would kill me. Could be convenient, yes. So in August of 1972, his ex, Bonnie, marries another man, and the big announcement in the paper could be a stressor because things change for him pretty quickly after that. In the fall of 1972, he enrolls in an 8-month internship with the Roseville PD. So he had, wanted to be military, wanted to be law enforcement, and he's sort of working on that, making that happen. So in May of 1973, about 6 months after Bonnie gets married, reports start coming in of houses being ransacked in Visalia. Now, it's the term ransack it just sounds like 1920s, prohibition. I'm going to ransack you. It just sounds odd, but I guess it's the best description of any when someone comes and tears up your shit. So sometimes things are stolen. Sometimes things are not. The things that are taken are typically very inconsequential, not really of any monetary value, but sometimes of a sentimental value, like one of a set of earrings. So the woman can't wear her earrings anymore, and he has one and she has the other. Could be so that he stays tied to her, because
Ooh, that's creepy.
He's cray-cray. Right. So during the time of the Visalia ransacker, which is May of 1973 to December of 1975, 125 ransackings and 1 murder and 1 attempted murder take place. And I think that's when things, again, change for him. So 73 is a big year. He starts ransacking. He in May of 1973, joins the Exeter police force. And he announces his engagement to a fellow student, Sharon Huddle. And they plan on marrying in November of 1973. Now, what's fascinating is his birthday is November 9th, and their wedding anniversary is November 10th. Sorry, his birthday is November 8th. Their wedding anniversary is November 10th. So in 1974, there's so many break-ins. I can't list them all because we would run out of space on the cloud. 125 of them, within a 2-year period. So that there's a lot. It's, over 60 a year. So he's busy. He does seem to take off his birthday and his first wedding anniversary, but he's pretty damn busy from April to December of 74. So in September of 75, this is where things, I think, really turn around for him, and he changes his MO. There's an attempted kidnapping of a teenager named Beth Snelling, and her father, Claude Snelling, who's a professor, is chasing someone out in his backyard who has attempted to kidnap his daughter, Beth. He shoots Claude Snelling in the shoulder, it spins him around. He falls onto the patio, and he's shot in the back, and he's dead. He lets Beth go, and he escapes in the night. So 3 months after that, the last known instance of the Visalia ransacker, and again, I think this is where he perfects his MO. He tries to kidnap a woman, attempted to kidnap a girl, and ends up killing her father. And I don't think he was ready for that. I think he wasn't planning on murder. But
yeah, I didn't even know that had happened.
Yeah, it's tied to him now, but his swath was so wide that it's hard to list everything. The way these minds work is that they escalate and build. So he ransacked homes. So that was his first step, I'm just going to go in and move your shit around. He then burglarizes homes and goes in when you're not home, and you may know you've been burgled and you may not. He comes back and sneaks in the middle of the night and rapes you, and he takes your body, and then he eventually has to come back and rape and kill you. So he has to escalate in his actions because he's not getting what he wants anymore by just taking an earring. He's got to skip ahead to you don't pass go, you don't collect your $200, you have to take a life or a couple of lives usually. It's a couple typically, and it's a man and a woman because that somehow would make him feel more powerful. So his final ransacking also includes an attempted murder. So Officer Bill McGowan has trapped the ransacker in a backyard, and he's back up against a fence, and he can't find a way out. And Officer McGowan is just going to arrest the guy who he thinks is a ransacker. And the guy turns around and, raises his right hand and says, don't shoot, in a very high-pitched voice. Don't shoot, can you see my hands up? Well, he's left-handed, and his left hand was in his jacket pocket, and he pulls out a gun. Now, I have heard law enforcement use this, and I'm guessing any of the tipsters that are in law enforcement can tell me if this is right or wrong. When you're trained, you hold your flashlight with your arm completely extended. I don't know if that gives you a wider view in front of you with a light so you can see, but Officer McGowan has his flashlight in front of him, extended completely out in front of him, and the Visalia ransacker pulls a gun out of his left-hand pocket and shoots at Officer McGowan. It hits his flashlight. The glass breaks and flies up and hits him in the side of the face and cuts him near his eye.
Jeez, I didn't know about this either.
It knocks him down. Yeah. Well, I think this was a turning point. This is when he changed his MO and thought, I can't try and kidnap anyone and take them out of their home. I now need to formulate my plan where I attack them and terrorize them in their own home. And boy, did he find his sweet spot. He found a way to do it to the 87th degree. So Officer McGowan is blown back. He's on the ground. His partner comes running up thinking that his partner has been shot and is dead. And unfortunately, the ransacker gets away. So Officer McGowan, also still around, and is heartbroken that he was that close. And many law enforcement came within very close distance of him, and he always managed to slip away like the greasy fucking rat that he is. So he takes a little break after that, after he's killed Claude Snelling and almost killed a police officer. He takes a little break, and I think he realizes he's got to find a way to get into the houses. He can't take anyone out. He's got to go in. And he does. So this is going to seem like a long list, and it is. And for privacy's sake, many of the names are pseudonyms. Some of the victims have come forward and are very vocal about what happened to them. And God bless them, because they are fantastic. And those who do not want to be known, it is completely understood why they don't.
Yeah, but I think it's a good idea. I think it's great that you're going to mention them all, because it's really horrible, the breadth of all of this.
It is horrible. It's, obviously Sacramento County detectives think that this is one of the larger serial rape and murder cases across the country. And there are obviously people who have done, much worse. John Wayne Gacy and Gary, whatever his name is, the Green River Killer.
Oh, right.
There are people that have done a lot worse. I'm not saying murder isn't bad because it's horrible, but I'm also saying terrorizing people after you've terrorized them in their home is really bad. If you kill someone, you kill them and it's over. And I don't know what, whatever their belief system is, they may go on to a nice soft cloud in heaven, or they may just become fantastic fertilizer. But to try and live your life under the stress of someone calling you, terrorizing you, I mean, he really is just the absolute definition of a terrorist in every way. So he takes a break and formulates, I think, a plan to break in to someone's home and rape them. And he starts his reign of terror on June 18th of 1976. He rapes Carrie Frank in the city of Rancho Cordova. Takes about a month off. July of 76, he rapes 15-year-old Sally Graham in the city of Carmichael. In August of 1976, the Exeter Police Department, where he is working, reports that they've been given extra funds to have 2 officers to help stop burglaries and to train citizens on how to prevent burglaries. It's known as the Joint Attack on Burglaries Task Force. Uh-huh.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And it's funded with taxpayers, city and state local taxes.
Oh, boy.
One of the officers, there's 2. One of them is Joseph James DeAngelo from Exeter. So August 29th of 1976, he rapes Rose Scott in Rancho Cordova. In September of 76, he rapes Debbie Patrick in Citrus Heights. October 4th of 1976, Frances Wood is at home making dinner, and her son keeps picking up the phone to someone who doesn't say anything or breathes. Finally, she answers the phone and shouts into the phone that the police know who he is, they know that he's calling, and they're going to get him. And he whispers into the phone, "I'm going to kill your husband." And she reports this to the police, and yet she is raped the next morning very early. October 9th of 1976, Heather Williams in Citrus Heights. October 18th in 1976, busy day for him. Joyce Parker in Carmichael at 2:30 a.m. October 18th, same day, Julie Lowe in Rancho Cordova at 11:30 p.m.
In one, that's
In
less
one
than
day.
24 hours.
That's right.
Less than 24 hours.
It's 22 hours, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. So about a month later, in November of 1976, the Sheriff's Department has a town hall meeting at Del Deo Elementary School in Carmichael. And Detective Carol Daly, who is a badass, if you ever can see interviews with her, I have no idea how old she is now. She may be close to Joseph DeAngelo's age, in her 70s. She was a young detective, and she was everything that Angie Dickinson wished she could have been in Policewoman. Carol Daly is the shit. She was beautiful, and she was strong and tough and smart, and she leads this town hall meeting, a woman. In 1976, I'm just in awe of her, and in awe of her now when she speaks, when she's interviewed. She's a badass. So she suggests to the 300 or more people who show up, they thought they might have a handful of people, but 300-something odd people show up to this elementary school gymnasium. And she says, if you are attacked, you must injure your attacker. And she's basically saying, without saying it, you got to fucking shoot to kill. If somebody comes in your house, fucking shoot to kill. This is not somebody you play around with and you kneecap them. You don't pull a Nancy Kerrigan and knock them down. No. You fucking end their life, because that's what they're going to do to you. So a man from Italy stood up and said that no woman would ever be raped if there was a man in the house. And certainly it would never have happened in Italy because the attacker would already be dead. And 6 months later, Joan Rosali, who lives in Carmichael, is raped while her husband and his father and her 2 small sons are in the house. That's when he starts going after couples, is after he's been given a public challenge, which no one knew that Mr. Rosali was issuing a public challenge to the East Area Rapist, but he did. And I hesitate to call him the East Area Rapist because he's already killed at this point. He killed Claude Snelling and he attempted to kill Officer McGowan. So I'm just going to call him the Golden State Killer, which is what he is, just pure and simple what he is. So before he gets to Joan Rosali, in November of 76, he rapes 16-year-old Kim Alcone in Citrus Heights. And if you remember the date, November 10th, that's his third anniversary to his wife. Third anniversary he spends raping a 16-year-old girl.
Wow.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, Sharon didn't get him a card.
Oh, my God.
I can't.
When did he marry Sharon?
3 years earlier, November 10th of 1973.
And this is the woman that, oh, my God.
Yeah.
He had kids with her.
Mm-hmm, they have three daughters. They're born later, and they think that may have actually been one of the things that halted some of his action. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in probably episode 2 or 3, because this can't really be all covered in one. This is episode 1. We're going to call it the early years, the Northern California years. So to end up his year of 1976, December 18th, he rapes 15-year-old Nancy Hauser in Fair Oaks. So soon after that, he sort of, I wouldn't really call it a promotion, but his boss in Exeter said, you're way too overqualified for this. You should work for the FBI. Well, he doesn't really go to work for the FBI, but he transitions to another jurisdiction, the Auburn PD, the city of Auburn. So he becomes a police officer in the city of Auburn. So he probably gives that a couple of weeks' time, and then he's back at his favorite form of work, terror. So on Tuesday, January 18th, he rapes a 25-year-old woman in Sacramento. On Monday, 24th, in Citrus Heights, a 25-year-old woman at 3:30 in the morning. Monday, February 7th, Patricia Lacer in Carmichael. She's 30. Now, here's where he also takes another turn. He is attempting to scout out houses, and a family sees someone in the backyard. 19-year-old Bill Carmichael goes and chases this person across several yards until the person turns and shoots Bill Carmichael in the stomach. Now, Bill survives, but if you've seen any recent interviews, Bill's very happy to lift his shirt and show you the scar, and it's big. So he carried a gun with him, I think, for things like that, to shoot at Officer McGowan or anyone that trapped him. He doesn't do well when his plan doesn't go the way he wants it to go. He panics and kills. He really wasn't up to killing at that point, but he felt forced and decided to just kill. In the meantime, he makes lots of really ridiculous phone calls. 16-year-old Erica Janik kept getting phone calls of someone saying, "Is your mother home? Is your father home? I need to talk to him. I'm a roofer." Well, her parents go out of town that weekend, and March 18th, 16-year-old Erica Janik of Rancho Cordova is raped. It's April that he begins with couples. So he waits a month or two before he goes after Mr. Rosali, who stood up at the town hall meeting to say, a man, if there's a man in the house, that's not going to happen. He doesn't seem to mind going into homes where there's children, where there are dogs. There's theories that he showed up and walked dogs, so dogs would get used to him. Several dogs were found with rib bones. He would feed them bones, I guess.
Wait, they think he may have gone in before the rape, and like days before, and gotten the dog used to him?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was seen walking dogs many times.
Oh my God.
And no one pays attention to a dog walker until your neighbor is raped, and you're like, wait, that sounds like the guy that was walking a dog.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so many bizarre details about this.
I mean, the guy had no fear.
That's yes. If his plan went according to plan, he was fearless. If something stepped into his plan, he stopped for a while, which is what happened with Claude Snelling. He didn't plan on killing a young girl's father who thwarted her kidnapping attempt. Truly died a hero, saving his daughter, but lost his own life. He didn't expect to have Detective McGowan chase him into a corner that he couldn't get out of. So he shot at Detective McGowan. This is the part that I wonder about. Because he was a frighteningly good shot, I don't know if he actually meant to kill Officer McGowan. It could have just been a lucky break that he hit the flashlight and not the officer, or he could have subconsciously not wanted to kill the officer because he was a cop at the time.
Right. That's an interesting theory.
He was just such a good shot that I don't know how he hit the flashlight. But, maybe there's someone in law enforcement who could explain. It's the extended arm flashlight hold, which Officer McGowan thinks saved his life. So starts making phone calls. He breaks in before he comes to rape you, finds out things about you, finds your name on a piece of mail, stole a lot of driver's licenses when he would break in and rape people. Many bizarre things happen. People find a block of cheese with tooth marks in it. People find a jar of cherries that's gone from their refrigerator and is on their neighbor's porch.
What a fucked up asshole.
Yeah, it's very childish. So it's very childish. So in May of 1977, he calls someone and says, "You're next," and he whispers it 3 times. "You're next." And he breaks in and rapes an unnamed woman. And she was warned, and it is awful to think that actually could happen. So May 3rd, he rapes Sandra Turanian and ties up her husband, Leonard. May 5th, he rapes Sue Barger and ties up her boyfriend, Philip Raines. On Sunday, May 14th, he rapes Linda Odell of Citrus Heights and ties up her husband. It is heartbreaking. May 17th is when he circles back to the Rosoli family, raping Jane Rosoli because her husband said it would never happen with a man in the house. So he's got to up his ante, right?
What's stunning is that when he goes on these sprees, it's all within a matter of days apart, or sometimes the next day. I mean,
it is pretty big. It's pretty big. So he makes a bit of a blunder on May 30th at 11:47 after running from someone and fleeing over a fence that on the other side of the fence was a concrete canal. And they think, you know what? He had to have hurt himself. So they check every hospital they can. And the American River Hospital reports that a man who gave the information of a man whose wallet was stolen 2 years prior had a shoulder injury, and he gave all fictitious information. Unfortunately, they didn't take a description of the patient. But he did fuck up and gave his real age. He was 31.
oh.
And he gave a false name, a false address, everything, but said he was 31. And when they asked more questions, he left. So he left with his shoulder injury, and it probably had to be bad. I'm going to guess it had to be bad. I hope it was really bad. I hope it still hurts right now, Joseph James DeAngelo. I hope you got a rotator cuff that never healed right. I really hope that. So September 6th, he rapes a 27-year-old woman named Jennifer Sanford in Stockton. Her husband and her 5-year-old daughter were at home. On October 1st, he rapes Margarita Lopez, who's 17, on October 1st at 1 in the morning in Rancho Cordova. On February 21st at 3 a.m., he rapes Sandra Belton, a 32-year-old woman from Sacramento who's home with her husband, Don Belton. On October 29th, he rapes Margaret Hayworth at her home at 1:45 a.m. in Sacramento with her husband, Eric Hayworth. Now, most people who know anything about this story know that he found simple, ingenious ways to do his in-home attacks. When he upped the ante and there was a male presence that could have fought him, and it could have been really bad, he devised fantastic plans to have the male person lie on their stomach, and he would stack china on top of their back as an alarm system. And he would say through clenched teeth, "If I hear these move, I'll kill everyone in the house." Everyone in the house with your best china stacked on your back. Really awesome. The fifth victim, Jane Carson Sandler, she recounts hearing dishes and pots and pans clanging in the kitchen. He was actually cooking. He didn't just rely on what did you have as a leftover. He made himself meals. He cooked himself food while you were tied up and had been raped and were waiting for him to go away. And he just took his time because he's a terrorist. So on Thursday, November 10th, again, does that ring a bell? It's his wedding anniversary.
Again?
Mm-hmm. He rapes a 13-year-old girl in Sacramento, Deborah Kent. We now know Deborah Kent is actually Margaret Wardlow. These pseudonyms only work if you don't come forward and say who you are, but it was Margaret Wardlow, and her mother was home. And Margaret Wardlow knew that if she heard dishes being stacked on top of her mother, she was going to be raped. And she knew that if he put dishes on her, her mother would be raped. And she heard the dishes and heard him say to her mother, "Don't move or I'll kill you." And she knew she was going to be raped. So 13-year-old Margaret Wardlow, a.k.a. Deborah Kent, was raped November 10th at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. He did other bizarre things like going to people's homes and turning off their electricity. He was very good at cutting your phone line, which, honest to God, I thought was only in movies. I didn't realize how vulnerable the telecommunications world is. I guess most people now, have cell phones. We still have landlines, and I love them because our cell phones don't work so great in the house. But, I guess it's easy to cut a phone line. I'm not giving anyone any ideas. I'm just saying. This was in the 70s. The end of the 70s, thank God. So December 2nd, he rapes a 36-year-old woman, Roxanne McNeil, in Sacramento. On December 9th, he calls Joan Rosoli back. He's raped her in May after the previous November her husband said that would never happen with a man in the house. He calls her and says, "Merry Christmas, it's me again, remember?"
Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Because he's 12. He's a 12-year-old with a gun. He calls the Sacramento Sheriff's Department in December of 1977 and says, "You're never going to catch me, you dumb fuckers. I'm the East Area Rapist. I'm going to fuck again tonight. Be careful out there." Click.
Is that exactly what he said? Or
Exactly
is it...
quotes.
Oh, my God.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I keep saying, oh, my God, but all these details are just like, they're amazing.
Overwhelming.
Well, yeah. Overwhelming is probably, I guess that's probably the best word.
It's so hard to believe that a human being could do all of this, fade back into, your neighborhood and live a quote unquote normal life like your creepy old neighbor. It's overwhelming, the level of terror that he perpetrated. It was amazing. So January 2nd of 1978, Carrie Frank, who is the first victim, keeps getting weird phone calls. The police decide to give her a recording device on her phone. You have probably heard the recordings of poor Carrie Frank's more than anything else in the world because it's so awful, and it sells newspapers, television shows. It's that high-pitched, creepy-ass voice. So he calls her on January 2nd after terrorizing her through the Christmas holidays, and through his clenched teeth and his high-pitched voice, "I'm gonna kill you. Gonna kill you. Gonna kill you, bitch. Bitch, bitch, fucking whore." And then there's a lot of deep breathing, like a 12-year-old, and then he hangs up. Now, there's a call that was placed on January 6th to a counseling service, and these are just volunteers, and someone says, "I have a problem. I need help. Can you help me? I don't want to do this anymore." And the volunteer says, "Do what?" And the caller says, "Well, I guess I can tell you guys. You're not tracing this call, are you?" And he becomes very violent and angry. And the volunteer says, No, we don't trace any calls." And the caller says, "I'm the East Area Rapist, and I feel the urge to do this again. I don't want to do it, but then again I do. Is there anyone there who can help me?"
Here's something else I didn't know.
Yeah.
Shit!
He says, "I don't want to hurt these women or their husbands anymore." But then he becomes violent again. "Are you tracing this call? Are you tracing this call?" The volunteer says, "No, we're not tracing any call. Do you want a counselor?" The caller says, "I've been in counseling all my life. I was in the Stockton State Hospital." "Oh, I shouldn't be telling you that. I can't trust you." "Are you tracing this call?" The volunteer says, "We're not tracing the call." And the caller says, "I don't believe you. You're tracing this call." And he hung up. So, of course, the police immediately go through all of the records of the Stockton State Hospital, but they don't find any viable suspect from the list, whether he was lying about that, or maybe he was in a different hospital, or maybe he was never in a hospital at all. I don't know.
Or maybe it was just somebody pretending to be him. Who knows?
It could have been that, but I think the voice was so distinctive, they're pretty sure it was him.
Was it recorded? I can't remember. Was it recorded?
It was not.
Okay.
It was dictated by the volunteer. The volunteer wrote down everything that was said, but no, they actually didn't trace the call. So let's see. In January of 1978, he calls Denise Kent, who he raped previously, and said, "I haven't struck in a while. I'm going to fuck you in the butt. See you soon." He calls January 20th, 10 minutes later, Sandra Turanian, who he had previously raped, and said, "I haven't struck in a while. You're going to be my next victim." Even though she was a previous victim. "I'm going to fuck you in the butt. See you soon." I love that he says butt.
Yeah, that does prove that your 12-year-old kind of done that.
Yeah. So he's a 32-year-old, 12-year-old. I don't know that he ever really, advanced and chronologically and age. It's crazy. I mean, all of this, there's just no other word you can say but crazy. So Dana and Elaine Shapiro, mother and daughter, receive weird phone calls where the caller says, "Is your mother there?" And he had a very funny sounding voice, is the quote that they give, a funny sounding voice. He calls 4 times. And then on Saturday, January 28th at 10:15 p.m., he breaks into the Carmichael home of Dana and Elaine Shapiro and rapes her younger sister, Elaine. Now, the murders that he is being held on at this moment is a couple. The people that he is almost assuredly tied to their murder. February 2nd at 9 o'clock in Rancho Cordova, a beautiful young couple, Brian and Katie Majori, are walking their dogs. Or their dog, pardon me. And they're sort of in a back alley behind some houses. And they come across someone who, I guess, didn't expect to be come across. And he shoots Brian, and Katie runs, and he tracks her down and kills her. Now, there's a composite sketch of someone who looks like the East Area Rapist. They were shot with similar gun that other murders have been tied to him. So he killed people that were just walking because they saw him.
Yeah, up until now, I thought that was the first victims. Until you told me about the father saving his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So March 16th, he calls a 28-year-old mother of 2 children and says, "I need someone to talk to while I masturbate. Are you interested?" 12. He's 12. March 18th, in Stockton at 1:05 a.m., he rapes Eleanor Hickey and assaults her boyfriend, Andrew Churchill. He calls Jean Allen and says, "I fucked your sister." On Thursday, April 6th, he rapes an adult female, no name given, in Rancho Cordova. He calls Jean Allen again and says something unintelligible. Then on Friday, April 14th, he breaks in and rapes Jean Allen, who's 15. On Monday, June 5th, he rapes Danielle Christie, 27 years old, in Modesto, and assaults her husband, Howard Christie. He rapes Faye Carmichael on June 7th at 4 a.m. in Davis. She's 21 years old. On Friday, June 23rd at 1:30 a.m. in Modesto, he rapes Wilberta Montgomery and assaults her husband, Albert Montgomery. On Saturday, June 24th, in Davis, California, he rapes 32-year-old Julie Webster and assaults her husband, Marvin Webster. They have a 10-year-old son and 2 smaller children that he leaves alone. On Thursday, July 6th, in Davis, he rapes Sheila Singleton, who's 33, and she has 2 sons with her who are 5 and 7. Now, the Sacramento Union ties the Visalia ransacker to the East Area Rapist.
And what year are we in now?
78. Ties, or is it 79? Hold on. I have to go back and look for sure.
Oh, it's okay. It's the overwhelming number of these.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It's really, my head is spinning.
It's overwhelming to try and keep it all. I guess we're in 78. So this newspaper, the Sacramento Union, ties the Visalia ransacker to the East Area Rapist. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Department calls the Sacramento Union irresponsible for suggesting that they're the same person. And the Sacramento Union reports that there's a feud between the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department and the Visalia PD. And that is the truth. There is a horrible feud because no one will ever share information, which is one of the worst things that can ever happen, can really ever happen.
This is apparently a huge deal, and it's been going on forever. That one police organization doesn't want to cooperate with others.
That's exactly, I think, part of a huge problem. If you find any information on this case, you'll find that Detective Paul Holes, who started as, a lab scientist guy and became an investigator because of this case, and went out in the field and walked where the crime scenes were that were by this time, 15, 20, 25 years old. He looked at all of them and he tried to unite police agencies, as we'll find out in episode 2 and 3. Some agencies wouldn't even admit that they had any sort of rapes or murders ever.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not. And it wasn't just Detective Holes. It was previous officers who'd been on the case, who had been, retired. They've been on the case for decades. They had called other police agencies, namely Santa Barbara County and Ventura County, and they're like, nope, we don't have anything like that.
That's just stupid.
Nope, not at all. And the thing is, he had so many indicators of his awful, unique behavior. He tied intricate knots, these diamond knots that are, very prevalent in the military. They're a 10-step knot that make it hard for whoever's being tied up to get out of them, but easy for a perpetrator to slip them off. He, besides his gun, he typically did not bring a weapon to a crime scene. He would use whatever was handy. He would tear up towels or sheets to usually use those as blindfolds. He would most of the time bring his own shoelaces to bind someone's wrists and ankles. I mean, it is an extremely odd thing to think you're going to perpetrate a pretty vicious, brutal crime and show up and think, I'll find something in the house to use as a weapon. I'll find something else. Later on, we find out that one couple was bludgeoned to death with a piece of wood from their wood pile for their fireplace that was out on their patio. So he doesn't bring a weapon. He uses what he's got at his disposal, so to speak. So he's still a cop at the Auburn PD, and on July 21st, he is caught shoplifting a hammer and a can of dog repellent from the Pay and Save in Citrus Heights. Now, the employees tackle him and tie him to a chair until the police come. And the police come and they find out he's one of their own. And they describe him as being in an emotional state. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think he likes getting caught.
No, when things don't go the way he wants them to go, when he gets out of control, his control freakedness amps up and he becomes a real terror. He really, it's shown over the cases subsequently from here on in, he becomes much more violent, and especially much more violent and brutal if someone fights back and they have a potential of getting an upper hand. He actually even stops for a while when he's probably taken, some hits of his own. So he is, arrested for shoplifting. He's fired from the Auburn PD, basically because he will not face any sort of questioning. They said, we'll have a hearing and you can, and he's like, nope. So he refused to answer any questions and just took the termination. Now he appealed the firing and tried to sue the Auburn PD, but that was eventually dismissed. So we find out now that his boss from the Auburn PD, he told someone else that he was going to kill his boss. He went to his home and walked around his home but couldn't figure out which one was his bedroom. A few days after, apparently, he tried to kill his boss, his ex-boss's 4-year-old daughter was laying beside his bed when he woke up. And he's like, "What's going on, honey?" And his daughter said, "There was a man outside my bedroom window shining a flashlight in last night, and he scared me." They did find shoe prints outside the windows. And this is the part, and he's fully capable of answering the question, and he answers it without hesitation. And God bless him for his honesty, but he just, I want to kick that poor, sweet old man in the goddamn gonads. Every time he's interviewed, the interviewer says, "So did you think it was Joseph DeAngelo?" And he's like, "Nope, never did." Never dawned on him that the man he fired, who was pretty weird, who was arrested for stealing a hammer and dog repellent, might have been the guy terrorizing his 4-year-old daughter and attempting to kill him. Never dawned on him.
So he's a real Phi Beta Kappa.
I feel a little bad for him. He's an old man, and he seems, he said, "I feel like it's a black eye on the police force. I wish we could have caught him. I wish we could have been more aware." And it's like, yeah, hindsight's 20/20, Grandpa. I guess you're fucking lucky you weren't, I can't even think about that. So, wrapping up the Northern California years, a personal story of someone you may remember from episode 7, Pam Coronado, who is a brilliant psychic detective, has a weird tie-in to the Golden State Killer. And in her own words, from her own blog, I was probably someone who woke her up on her birthday because Joseph DeAngelo was booked. He was arrested or he was taken into custody on a Tuesday afternoon, but he was arrested, officially booked at 2:29 a.m. on Wednesday, Pam's birthday. So I wasn't sleeping, and I'd gotten lots of, "Oh my God, can you believe?" So I don't know what time Pam gets up, but I didn't want to, wake her up too early. But I was like 7 o'clock, and I was like texting her, "Happy birthday. They got the Golden State Killer on your birthday." So she wrote about her personal experience, which she really hasn't told a lot of people because it's such such a horrifying, awful story, and to protect a case, the anonymity of someone she was working on a case. So, in her own words, she says, "In 2007, I was asked to work on a case in Sacramento. For confidentiality reasons, I can't tell you what I was working on, but midway through my tour of the crime scene, I started picking up impressions of a crime that didn't fit the crime I was supposed to be looking at. A detective on site was puzzled briefly, but soon recognized my description of that of the East Area Rapist. This detective had been working on the elusive rapist for years and was fascinated by my sudden shift to this most frustrating and prolific attacker. The enthusiastic detective then took me to one of the crime scenes, and that's when I came to experience the energy of the East Area Rapist. Creepy doesn't begin to describe his energy, but sadistic is close. I've seen a lot in my career, and nothing has frightened me as much as this guy, to the point of refusing to work on him after I fled Sacramento. And fled, she really did. One other case that has left me feeling as distressed, and I'll go into that in a moment. Most homicides have to do with revenge or greed or another personal motive. Serial killers terrorize their victims for sport, and Joseph James DeAngelo was in it to traumatize people. This intention became quite clear to me as I paced the room in which he had done his ritual abuse. I'll never forget the tightly controlled, ritualistic, and seemingly calm outward manner in which he worked, but it was masking a wild and barely contained mania within. This insight was disturbing enough, but it was actually his voice that did me in. I could hear his high-pitched voice in my head and described it to the detectives. As soon as I mentioned his weird voice, they decided to play a recording of the East Area Rapist threatening a victim on her voice machine to see if it matched. My hair stood on end, my skin crawled. I literally wanted to scream, and that was it. I was done. I went home and refused to work on him again. I felt paranoid and unsafe, like he could be lurking anywhere, and I had trouble sleeping for days, and it took years to get that voice out of my head. Now, the other case she's talking about that made her feel similar, I know I can mention these things because I actually asked her. I don't want to compromise any case, but for those of you familiar with the television show Sensing Murder, Pam Coronado and Lori Campbell are two psychic detectives that were brought into crime scenes and had to work completely blind. They never knew what kind of scene they were walking into. And they were brought into a place in Garden Grove, California, and it was a cold case from 1978. And Pam began to realize it was a serial killer. You can find this all on YouTube, Sensing Murder. I think there's a snippet of it on something called Vimeo, a snippet of her reading. And Pam picked up such violence and mania that she had to go out to the backyard and throw up. She had a intense pain in the top of her head, and felt such fear in her heart, she really could barely stand to be there. So this person's, I'm just going to have to go ahead and, her name is Patricia Neufeld, and it's a cold case from 1978, and it turns out that Joseph DeAngelo's mother and stepfather lived very close to there at that time. He may have visited his mother and stepfather, allegedly, and Patricia Neufeld was beaten to death with a bowling pin that was found in her son's room. She operated a small daycare. There were about 5 children there, like 2 of her own and 3 that she, watched. The kids were not harmed at all. And her 10-year-old son came home from school and found his mom murdered, beaten to death with his bowling pin that was found in his room. The perpetrator wore a mask and had a horrible demeanor and wanted to terrorize her, and he did. And Pam is hoping that they will reinvestigate and see if Patricia Neufeld's case is somehow related to the Golden State Killer.
Wow.
The detectives said that they thought it was a serial killer named Gerald Parker, who was known as the Bedroom Basher. And they he was in San Quentin. They flew to San Quentin to question him. And he said, nope, that's not one of mine. And he denied it, and he's denied it 3 times. That's not one of mine. So apparently Gerald Parker is of another race, and Pam felt that the murderer was a white man who wore a mask. And when given a stack of pictures, she flipped through them and found Gerald Parker and said, well, this guy's a serial killer, but I don't think he's your serial killer.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. So I know for sure that they are reopening a case from Simi Valley, California, of a man who spent 38 or 39 years in prison for the murder of his girlfriend and her 6-year-old son. And he was exonerated just last year in November of 2017 when his DNA did not match that of the killer. So really hoping that there are other cases that may have gone cold or that someone else could have been blamed for, that Joseph DeAngelo, it gets tracked back to him, because that man is a monster, and that is the episode 1 of the Golden State Killer, the early years. Next episode, we move down the coast, and more cowbell.
Remember, if you've got anything on the Golden State Killer case that you think we might find helpful, call us at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7669. 7837 or send us an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. See you next episode.